Asia Pacific is strategically important to the IT industry, with many emerging companies taking risks to drive innovation in the digital first global environment, according to IDC Group Vice President of Domain Research, Avneesh Saxena. In this episode of Beyond Distribution with GTDC, he joins host Frank Vitagliano to discuss regional sales trends, new technology opportunities, and the shifting worldwide IT landscape. Saxena also provides a sneak peek of his keynote presentation at the GTDC Summit APJ event in Singapore, including the effects of AI and cybersecurity advances on technology sales.
Welcome, everybody, to our next episode of Beyond Distribution. I am thrilled today to have with me Avneesh Saxena, Group Vice President, Data and Analytics from IDC Asia Pacific. And for many of you who know and follow us at GTDC, you know that we've developed a tremendous relationship with IDC, partly with our data program in North America and our soon-to-come data program in Asia Pacific. So Avneesh, welcome. We're glad to have you.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Frank.
Yeah. So Avneesh, let's talk a little bit about background first. How did you kind of get into the world that we now live in, particularly in the research side, which is a really interesting place to be?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, when I started, I was just looking for a job, really, and this sounded like a very good job, sitting in front of a computer and analyzing stuff. But then the more I got into it, I realized that it has great challenges. You've got to stand behind these numbers, defend them. And I've been put out there in front of executives and boardrooms across the region, defending some of our numbers, explaining those trends, and those guys are a hell of a lot smarter than me. So the education there was just amazing, but it also gave me a lot of respect for the job and love for it. And that's probably why I've spent more than 25 years at IDC here in Asia Pacific researching this market across the region.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you something, based on our relationship and certainly well before that, because I spent a lot of my career in this space. I was with IBM for a while and a few other vendors. The IDC brand has always been, very, very well respected certainly in the IT community. And I think the key to the numbers is not only what's going to happen, but why. And
sure.
That's the piece that I think you guys do really, really well. What specific area of responsibilities do you have at IDC?
So our roles have changed over the years, but now today I look after data and analytics, which is everything that we do with data for Asia Pacific, Japan, outside China. I have a peer who runs China, since China is an entity on its own. With its own complexities and challenges. So between the two of us, we run Asia Pacific. So I'm responsible for the entire region outside China and almost every technology area, right from mobile phones all the way to mainframes to software in all its entirety, IT services, both professional and maintenance services. All of this falls under my purview for these markets.
Yeah, that's great. That's a lot there. And certainly in our world with technology continuing to evolve, it's always interesting. Always interesting.
It's getting tougher and tougher, I'll tell you that. I'm not getting younger, but every day I wake up and there's so much happening in that one night. Yeah. It's just amazing, with AI and with so many different companies, in this space. It's amazing.
Yeah, I'm with you. I tell, folks that sort of are around my age or around the years that we've spent in the business, if you get out of it for 3 to 6 months, you might as well stay out of it because you're very well behind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're right.
So how would you describe, the APJ community, today in terms of, what regions are offering significant growth? Where are we seeing maybe some things that aren't as positive, areas that might be lagging? How would you describe the overall market?
So what you're looking at, Frank, is the ECG of sorts on GDP in the green line, and the blue line is IT spending in Asia Pacific, Japan, outside of China. And what's amazing about, of course, many other regions, but definitely Asia Pacific, is that we've reached a stage after 2020, 2021, where IT has become so strategic that it's been able to hold its own despite the GDP struggling, as you can see with that green line. And much of that is because you see a lot of risk taking, you see a lot of leapfrogging, you see businesses wanting to be out there and being digital first entities in the region, whether it's DBS, or it's Singapore Airlines. You'll see a lot of these brands that have gone, far and ahead in terms of how they've used IT judiciously to drive business growth and, their businesses. And when you talked about the region, it's obviously not one region, right? It's a mix of countries. And what I'm showing you here is all the countries in Asia Pacific, including China, by the way, with this IT spending that happens in these countries. And this is 2024, by the way. And the line that you see on the top is the compound annual growth rate. So you were asking me,
Wow.
how do you define this region? You can tell it's so vast, and there's China and there's everything else. It used to be Japan and everything else 20 years ago when I started. And now Japan's less than half the size of China. And then there's these countries, obviously, like India and Indonesia, which are, going to be the next most populous countries. And, they have huge consumer bases and are very exciting as far as IT devices are concerned outside China now. And, everybody's expecting them to explode the same way and be able to offer those opportunities. And then there's the mature markets in Australia, Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, developed markets where the maturity of the audience here, the tech buyers, is immense. They've been working with mainframes, they've been working with Unix systems, and they're also the ones who are kind of leading in, the digital space, and so is Hong Kong. And then there's a whole emerging space, as you can tell, with Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia, where, there's been growth in spurts every now and then. But this is the region, and I'm going to stop talking here and let you digest this and ask me a follow-up question if you have.
Yeah, this is really a very interesting chart. First of all, I didn't realize that People's Republic of China was that much bigger than everybody else. That's
surprises.
Yeah, that's the first thing that jumps out at me when I look at the slide. The second thing is that pretty much across the board, perhaps with the exception of Korea at less than 5%, the growth rates are all pretty healthy. Now this is projected for compounded growth through 28. Okay, so this takes us through
5 years from 23 to 28.
Yeah, that's good. So what are some of the trends that are driving this kind of growth? What are you seeing?
Frank, there's a lot going on. And, like I told you, I do from mobile phones to mainframes and then, everything in between. So the trends obviously are there's a huge amount of footprint that we have in mobile phones. It's a young population in Asia Pacific. There's a whole lot of things that they do on mobile phones. In fact, countries like India leapfrog the whole thing where they couldn't really lay down the fiber fast enough. So mobile phones actually filled the gap. And then a whole lot of commerce and economy started happening around mobile phones. So they kind of leapfrog that whole, generation, which was fiber-based, to something which was more wireless and mobile-driven. So apart from mobile phones, which, in China and India and Indonesia and some of these countries, there's obviously a good amount of transformation that's going on. That's the one big thing which has stayed in the region for now almost 10 years. It started with the digital revolution, and even before that, cloud and mobility. And a lot of that work has happened and moved on now to the next era we call the AI era, right? And we continue to see them look at their roadmaps. And what is a given is that IT is no longer tactical. It's a strategic thing. We got to use it for business growth. We got to use it for positive outcomes, better customer experience. And so transformation has been the one thing which has helped revitalize the infrastructure industry, where people are now thinking about getting more power to be able to run AI workloads, build their own hybrid clouds, private and public. in trying to deal with the data sovereignty issues, as well as also cost to a certain extent. There's also obviously a lot of IT services. I mean, the whole thing about OpEx, where people start to realize we don't have to buy everything. We can lease it, we can rent it, we can use it like that. So an as a service model has been very, very popular. And almost everyone has now started to think about that as against, just writing big checks and buying technology, because they understand that it's a moving target, it's evolving fast, and they got to probably look at a balance between what they buy versus what they can pay as they go or grow. And then there's software, which is, everywhere. You look at it, it used to be very hardwired, right? The whole thing. And now it's all software driven. You got software defined data centers. Software is going to be one of the biggest pieces in AI as you talk about the platforms, and you talk about AI infused in all the applications. And it's going to be huge in terms of what it demands out of the hardware, the underlying hardware, which is a great story, by the way, for channels, because there's going to be more and more hardware selling in the next 2 or 3 years. So there's a whole lot going on, and I wish I had another 10 minutes to tell you what all is going on. But you can see that there's a whole lot of and one last thing is, of course, the PC. The AI PCs, that's the other thing that's going to be very interesting. We do believe that it's going to be not as fast as what you've seen on the infrastructure side, and it's going to be on a slow burn, but 26, 27, 28, you'll start to see a lot more of AI PCs shipping through. There's a lot of interest, but mostly on enterprise side today.
Yeah, that first of all, there was a lot there, and you're right. The trends are significant, and of course, AI is driving a lot of it. What's interesting is I was in a roundtable a couple of weeks ago with some CIOs, and obviously, you can't get into a meeting with an IT person these days and not talk about AI. But one of the things that struck me is there was a discussion about how quickly they would be ready to really take advantage. And what all of the CIOs told us in that room, and I'm sure you're hearing it because you guys talk to a lot more than I do, is they're still working on getting their data ready for AI, to really be able to take advantage. Do you think that will inhibit some of the growth? I mean, because the growth is ultimately going to come, but do you think it's taken a little bit longer because companies are really trying to figure out how they can become data ready, if you will, to really take advantage of AI?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm hearing the same thing, by the way. When I did a quick poll about a month ago in Hong Kong, where we had these CXOs in there, one of the biggest thing they had was data modernization, data transformation, because if you don't have the right data in place, what will you run the Gen AI on? And you have to clean it. You've got to make sure that you can actually make some reliable decisions based on that data. So you're right. And it's all over the place. It's fragmented. That's one. Second, Frank, it's the ROI. I've seen CIOs look at me and say that, I don't know if I'm ready to go in there and say that, let's get these 50 servers with the GPUs packed in it because that's what we need. And then do what? Exactly what am I going to do with them? Yeah. So there's a bit of a wait and watch where they're hoping that the skill pool goes up because they need people internally to be able to, do this for them. As also they want to make sure they can see around them, what are the references that are coming through? What's going on out here? Yeah. Now, in terms of the hardware readiness, a lot of service providers and hyperscalers are making sure that they're ready. That, if the customers have the business, and some of them are testing it, they're experimenting, they're doing a lot of things, with these public cloud providers in trying to make sure that, they understand a lot better in what's going on. So that will continue. And then they'll reach a stage just like cloud, probably, next year or middle of next year to end, when you'll start to see them realize that now I've got to figure it out. And then you'll see, a different scale altogether.
Yeah, that is really interesting because it is very similar to cloud. The difference is, I think when we begin to really see the impact, I think it will be really dramatic, right? And it took some time, and I remember having discussions and being on panels back when I was in the vendor community on when and how does cloud get monetized. And a lot of people were trying to figure that out. And ultimately, it happened. And now the same thing's happening now. And the same questions, when and how does it get monetized?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the one big thing with cloud was that the revenue earning for many of the tech suppliers was changing or going to change drastically. So that was a big question. With AI, I think it's more and more of the same in some ways, because, if you look at infrastructure, it's going to be a huge amount of infrastructure spending initially. And then there's going to be a truckload of software and services on top of that. So I think this might be something which helps revive the fortunes of many who've kind of, been there and done some of these things around infrastructure and realized suddenly that, well, maybe the sun was setting. No, it's not. It's a great revival. And then we haven't even talked about the edge, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So let me ask you a question. Obviously, we talked a little bit about the challenges here and some of the things that we're seeing, which frankly, I'd kind of characterize as early startup kind of challenges that are not surprising, right? When you
Sure.
hear it, it's kind of like, yeah, not surprising. But as you look at this thing playing itself out a little bit over the next 3 to 5 years, let's say, where do you see the real opportunities? Where do you see where people are really going to start leveraging the power that we're going to see here?
So if I look at, and this chart that I'm showing you is showing you AI and Gen AI spending. We track it by country. We don't do all 12 at the moment. There's the rest of Asia Pacific, but I'm only showing you the ones we do, right?
Yep.
And what I'm showing you is AI itself is huge, by the way. Let's not just get carried away with Gen AI. It's already happening. It's been happening for a long time, and there are a lot of projects in the pipeline, and they'll continue to be so. Not everything has to be Gen AI. But Gen AI is going to grow pretty fast. And you see this CAGR up there, right? And you can see overall spending is going to be huge, and Gen AI is going to be almost 30% of the overall spending by 2028. I think when you talk about use cases, right? I mean, there is here and now, which is a lot of lower hanging fruit, where people can see tangible evidence of being able to use AI and quickly be able to report on that. Productivity is one of the big ones. Media is one of the big ones where you're trying to do things with that. The experience where phone vendors are now pumping a lot of AI into the phones, and the customers are experiencing photography in a different way. They'll be able to search things in a different way. They'll be able to frame their discussions, conversations, where English language or lack of English language skills is going to get level off, because you'll have the same capability in being able to articulate yourself is amazing. And to be able to do things in an enhanced fashion. So that's one industry altogether. AI on PCs is going to drive another revolution when you start seeing that power, compute things on the edge, which has never happened before. And you start to see these data come through where customers are saying, wow, this is what I'm getting at the edge now, and this business relevance of this is amazing. So you'll see that pockets of explosions across the board in all these areas. But for all this to happen, Frank, it is the ecosystem. You have to get killer apps in there. People have to wake up to say that this is why I need it. And that one is lagging a bit. There are a few cases, they're not many. And it's industry based. Obviously, there are the usual suspects who are leading. The financial sector is there. Government to a certain extent, as they see national relevance to this, and they're investing in this. Education is one of them. Health is one of them. You start to see some of these sectors, kind of in the forefront. But then you've got all these manufacturing, utilities, transportation, and so on and so forth, retail, who also want to figure out, how do I get ahead of this and be able to do more? And I think that is happening. We have examples everywhere, by the way. Our spending guide breaks up, a huge amount of use cases that you can go into and start looking at and build a TAM around for these countries that I'm showing you here. And of course, the rest of the world.
Yeah, when we had our event in Europe earlier this year, and one of the things we'll talk about in a few minutes is our upcoming event in APJ, which you'll be part of. But when we had the event in Europe, Phil Carter came in and he spoke, and talked about AI and the use cases, and actually showed us the work that you guys have done across the board in all the different industries and the use cases. And it was incredible. One, the detail, and two, the number of areas where you could absolutely see that there would be tangible, benefits and results. But you got to kind of dig into every use case, and you got to look at it, and you got to understand it, and then you got to recognize how that will play itself out. But when you look at it from that standpoint, it becomes very compelling. Very compelling.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, look at security.
Yeah.
The gains that they're having in using AI on cybersecurity is just immense. It's a no-brainer. You've got to do that because that's the biggest problem that everyone's facing straight away. And so there's a huge amount of use cases there. So I think, yeah, you're right. I mean, these use cases, let me not give you an idea, give you a, indication that it's not happening. It's just that it's not as mass scale and it's going to happen pretty soon. You'll see a ripple impact as people start to see this, believe it. And as I said, the ecosystem comes together in a broader sense.
Yeah, yeah, good. So one of the things that's clearly happening, Avneesh, and you kind of referenced it a little bit and we're seeing it certainly in the channel business and distribution for sure, is the shift away from hardware to services and support, right? And the hardware piece will never go away because you're always going to need a PC or a server to
Right.
take advantage of these great technology advances, but it's clearly not growing as quickly as the other two areas. But I also sense there's a tremendous amount of service opportunities that are
Right.
out there for both the solution providers and certainly the distributors to help provide some of the services to their customers. Are you seeing that? Are you hearing that? Does that make
Oh, yeah.
sense to you? Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, services is going to be, the biggest thing out there. And if I were to break these countries that I just mentioned in a stack diagram, and I show you what percentage is services revenue, which is the light green on the top, versus the light blue in the middle, which is software and hardware that you see at the bottom. You can start to see, and this is just 24, and as we go towards 28, this green, the light green that you see for services is going to grow more and more. You're right. Once the hardware and infrastructure is done, at least for that moment, for that time being, you'll start to see services, take control where customers will be talking about migration, as I talked about transformation services. They'll talk about trying to make relevance of what they've invested in and trying to build solutions that suit their business and needs. There's a whole lot of services that are going to do that. The maintenance support doesn't go away. It gets, as you said, in fact, there's going to be more and more footprint. They're going to do that. But remember, I told you about as a service. Now, that's a very interesting thing. And we've seen that a lot with technology. And soon, I think you'll probably see some businesses as a service. And we've talked about this 7-8 years ago when cloud was coming to fore, and we said that this is going to happen. I see that with banks and software companies working together and trying to see how they can build something with IT services companies, which is very customized to their customer base, and that would be garbed as services. Services is huge. Also, cloud repatriation is a trend as customers have to look at how to rebalance their strategy. It's not like public cloud is going away. It's going to grow, and so will the private cloud. So you'll see a huge balance for various reasons. And we've started to see them again go back to some of these services companies to say, how can you help me in striking the right balance when I build this hybrid cloud framework with AI embedded in it now? And again, that's a discussion where services would be pretty important as far as going forward is concerned. So yes, you've hit it on the nail, and almost everybody who's been in the infrastructure business, and if they don't have some capabilities in the services area, well, they'll face a lot of challenges, I think. Either they have to partner or they have to build some homegrown services.
Yeah, well, and you hit on two key points. I mean, first one, when I look at these charts, it's clear that in most countries, it's 50-50, and it's taken a long time for that to happen, right?
Yeah.
And in some cases, it's heading services and software are heading higher than the 50% mark. The second piece that I think that's really really interesting is that as this continues to play out, the opportunities change within the channel, and they change in a good way because there's always been, other than maybe the beginning days of the PC, which I have to admit I was there for, when there was a lot of margin, in those boxes. This is where the margin opportunities are, right? This is where people are gonna really grow their business and grow their profitability, and but skills becomes really important here, and ensuring that either the skills exist within the community, or there's somebody and distributors are working to do this, capable of helping provide those skills on a services kind of led basis, if you will. And because I think that's going to be an area where the technology is going to lead, and the services, the capabilities and the skills are going to have to catch up a little bit.
No, absolutely. I mean, many of them are in fact just unsure where to invest. So we've done a service provider roundtable recently, and it's a question of where should we go? What do you think is the whole impetus going to be, and where should I put more money? I've got certain skills that I've developed over the last 10 years. I'm very good in cloud conversations now. But guess what? The syllabus has changed, and suddenly everybody's talking about AI. And I don't know how to get quickly into that. Do I partner? Do I go back to my vendors? To your point, you'll have to see how you can bridge those gaps and then invest wisely for the next 7, 8, 10 years, because your relevance depends on you being able to carrying that narrative which the customer is interested in, right? And you don't want to be one of those who's just following the agenda that's set by someone else, because then the margins go down. If you want to get into high value margin business, you have to get into some of these new conversations faster and try and see how you can stay relevant.
Yeah, yeah. What's interesting about that, and I spent a couple of years in my career running a solution provider, so I have a little bit of expertise here, is making those decisions are hard, and carving out the investment is hard, right? And I was doing it back in the 2017, 2018 timeframe, and back then it was cloud and cybersecurity. And the problem is, one, finding the people, and two, they were expensive. And so you could maybe invest in one practice, which might be 2 people. It was a significant investment, but it also took at least 9 to 12 months, in some cases as much as 15, to start realizing a return on that investment. And so that's one of the reasons why there are a lot of folks in the industry, led by the distributors, who are trying to help figure out how they can provide some of these services to their customers in order to mitigate that risk a little bit, right? And that, I think, will become really important over time.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I totally agree with that. And I think the visionaries will have to start looking at acquisitions if they can't organically build some of these things, or strategic partnerships, which I mentioned earlier. I think partner for partners is a real thing. And you'll probably see that happen a lot more with some of these ISVs who are probably by themselves not that big, but could ride on the shoulders of some of these bigger distributors to say that, yeah, I have the wares, but I don't have the avenue to be able to sell it. Show me the way. And I think that could be a thing for some of them.
I think it will. And I think the key that will drive that is there'll be enough margin in it for both partners, right? And that's typically reflective of a services business versus, the lower margin businesses. So Avneesh, we're getting kind of close to our end here. And before I finish, I definitely want to talk a little bit about our upcoming event that we've got in APJ. As I know, GTDC has launched our global council into APJ, and we currently have 5 or 6 members, and we're going to run our inaugural summit meeting on November 19th, in which you'll be keynote speaker there. And first of all, thank you for coming. We appreciate it. What are some of the key points that you plan on discussing at that event?
I was actually thinking of covering this whole fabric from PCs, mobile phones to AI platforms and AI infrastructure. So the crux of the presentation was going to be focused on all things AI and how it's, unraveling. What do we see in the short term, in the long term, to kind of, use that lens to be able to talk about how big is it? I mean, I understand the hype, but, can you show me some numbers behind this? When will it start to change gears? Something that we should know now. Is it tomorrow? 6 months? Because I'm not ready for that. But will it be a year away? I'm happy for that. So I want to paint a little picture on those. I want to also talk about the broader IT market. I also want to discuss real use cases, just like what you talked about, that one of my colleagues showed you in Europe. I want to show the same for AP. To be able to see that there's tangible evidence here that things are happening, and it's across industries. We may want to talk about some of the vendors, the leading brands that are out there, who are making the moves and then what's really going on. And there's some end user data, Frank, that I'd like to share, which kind of throw light on how their priorities are going to kind of change and be impacting the conversation that a lot of these tech suppliers will have to be ready about. So that's a mix of things, Frank, that I wanted to share with the audience. And it's topical, it's relevant, and I'm sure it's pretty hot.
Yeah, oh, it absolutely is, and I think that'll be fabulous. And I don't know, I can't speak for everybody else who'll be in that room, but I'm looking forward to it. So, well,
And you'll get a front seat.
yeah, well, thank you. Well, this has been great. I really appreciate you taking the time. And obviously, as I said earlier, you know, the GTDC IDC relationship is very, very strong. And now that, you know, we've met, we'll have an opportunity to continue to share ideas and engage. And I think that'll be really positive. So thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you in Singapore on November 19th.